For the past 5 years, the Alberta government has been quietly carrying out one of the most controversial wildlife control programs in the world. Amid rapid industrial expansion of the tar sands in Canada's boreal forest, hundreds of wolves have been shot from helicopters and poisoned by strychnine-laced baits planted in the forest. In recent months, the Canadian government released a caribou recovery plan that could claim the lives of 6,000 wolves over the next 5 years. But scientists throughout Canada and the US are challenging the government's motivation behind this strategy, suggesting the wolf is an innocent scapegoat, while the real culprit, the forestry, oil, and gas industries, are spared any real scrutiny.
We see movements like the ethical oil movement. It just doesn't tally the fact that we're trying to portray this sustainable, ethical source of oil.
I mean, I guess the goal of every propaganda campaign is to, first of all, confuse the public and sow seeds of doubt. It's extraordinary. And it's just another example how oil can really corrupt and change the tenor of a government very, very quickly. The average Canadian, if you were to sit down and were to examine the scale of it, would say, why has my government suddenly become the spokesman for one resource at the exclusion of everything else in this country that matters?
I think it's a very simple equation. It's about money. It's about nothing else.
We're poisoning wolves in caribou habitat when we know scientifically there's pretty minimal justification for doing that.
So we've kind of built up this momentum where development has expanded and gradually, increasingly displaced caribou from their habitat. Everybody has understood that this is a phenomenon that's happening, but nobody was prepared to step up and say, okay, we've got to deal with this situation. And they haven't. And now we're dealing with, I think, the real possibility that we could lose caribou from most of Alberta's landscape in the next 20, 30, 40 years.
The Canadian tar sands comprise the largest industrial development on the face of the earth, using tremendous amounts of water, natural gas, and other resources. The effects on the local environment have been devastating, especially for regional First Nations and communities that used to rely on the land for their food and water.
What it's like we living downstream from oil sands development, it's a haven. We get everything. We get all the pollution that comes from it, the health concerns that come out of it, deformed animals, deformed fish.
Oil development in the tar sands is increasing at a really unhealthy rate.
Industrialization is disrupting pristine wildlife habitat and forcing Canada's iconic caribou to the brink of local extinction. And while prominent scientists have called for more protective measures to recover caribou populations, the oil and gas industry and government have refused to slow the pace and scale of development.
What the federal recovery strategy in essence says is that we will not do the necessary things to safeguard their habitat, nor will we actually act to restore disturbed habitat. What we will focus on instead is killing wolves.
You just simply can't keep killing wolves and expect that you're going to save caribou in the long run, because it's not going to happen.
Then ultimately you can be left with the situation, we could be killing wolves in Alberta forevermore to try and reduce predation on caribou. We could be doing it for 50 years, for 100 years, and still without actually dealing with what the problem is, which is that we need protected habitat for caribou. It's not a pretty process at all.
The process is now dominated by oil and gas and timber interests. Take a look at the website of the Alberta Caribou Committee, the official group responsible for saving Alberta's caribou. Rather than a science-based decision-making body, this committee seems designed to protect industry, not wildlife.
It was a pretty clear message that we would kind of like to recover caribou in Alberta, but we're not going to do anything if it's going to have any negative impacts on the oil and gas industry.
You know, the Alberta Caribou Committee is structured to making industry happy and has nothing to do in regards to protecting the herd whatsoever. They're using strychnine. When they kill the wolves with strychnine, you got the birds, the ravens, and everything that come and feed off these carcasses, and you see them scattered throughout the surrounding areas where the wolves are being killed with this poison. Not only are they killing the wolves, but then there are small little predators with birds and whatever that live off dead animals that are out there in the land.
People, trappers, hunters, none of them like what's going on there because some of them have lost dogs, some of them have lost fur-bearing animals to the strychnine as a result of this campaign. It's costly, it's ugly, it's really not the long-term solution.
Rather than heed the advice of local peoples and scientists, Alberta plans to expand the wolf call across the province, spanning thousands of kilometers in areas where industry projects overlap with caribou habitat.
If you look at the diet of the wolf, we found that 80% of the prey the wolf was eating was deer, and only 10% of what they were eating was caribou.
As the cumulative social and environmental impacts of industrial expansion are becoming more well known, and international criticism of Canada's rush to expand the tar sands increases, both government and industry have sought to limit public criticism by launching extensive public relations campaigns to cover up and distract from the problems. The most cynical of these efforts is the so-called Ethical Oil campaign, launched by conservative commentator Ezra Levant, creator of the Ethical Oil Institute.
Today there's a better way. Ethical oil from Canada's oil sands. Ethical oil, a choice we have to make.
The Ethical Oil campaign is part of the larger campaign to confuse the public. And there's obviously no such thing. Oil can't be ethical. It's not an attribute that it has.
The whole ethical oil campaign is really all premised on one idea: let's prevent any debate.
We take no foreign money. Absolutely, we're 100% Canadian.
That wasn't my question.
We are 100% Canadian.
Are you taking money from Enbridge?
You know, everyone in the oil patch knows that there's no such thing as ethical oil. Never has been, never will be. This resource is about money. It's about money and power, and always has been. And this money and power combination throughout the world has changed the politics and economics of every country it's been in. Whether it's the United States, whether it's Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Russia, Venezuela, Canada. I mean, even if you just look at the companies that are developing the resource, not one of them has an ethical record of any kind. I mean, ExxonMobil is one of the world's largest companies, and it directed the whole campaign against climate change science. You have 3 national oil companies from China all involved in the tar sands now. All 3 of them are really poster boys for conflict oil. You have Total, a company that has supported dictatorship in Myanmar. You have BP, which has been behind all kinds of environmental disasters from Alaska to Texas to the Gulf of Mexico. So, I mean, there are no ethical players up there. They're all problematic. And so is the resource. The resource comes with huge economic, political, and environmental challenges. But if you don't want to have a debate, and you want to silence your critics, and you want to dumb down the conversation, then you throw in the word ethics.
Ethical oil or conflict oil? Which side are you on tonight on The Source?
I'm going to give you my thought on that whole issue, and I'm going to be very blunt in regards to what I think about ethical oil. It's all a scheme. It's all about a political agenda that they look at us, we're looking good on the world stage. I think Levant should come to this community and promote his ethical oil propaganda, and I'll give him my point of view.
It is a social issue, ultimately, and that's where the decisions will be made. The other side of it, the public has not been engaged to participate in that decision making. And because the public has not really been informed about the complexity of the issues, they're very susceptible to accepting those as being the only choices. So public engagement in a really big way is very, 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 very important.
It speaks to a larger issue, and it's not just Alberta, but I think it's North American-wide. To some extent, the public has got to, if they feel strongly about this, then they have to make the statement.
We want you to stop this propaganda campaign that is actually undermining our democracy.
Will we find a better way? Don't we owe it to future generations? Good policy relies on good science and an informed public. But when vital information is managed to protect special interests, how can we be sure our elected leaders are doing their job to protect the public's interest? The Wolf Call, like the Ethical Oil campaign, ignores both good science and the interests of the public. It is up to us to demand greater things.